The Pianist's Proposal. Chapter 1. Lady Cecily Bertram had grown up in houses so vast that her footsteps never echoed, and in rooms so richly adorned that she sometimes felt swallowed by the gilt and velvet. She knew precisely how a daughter of the Earl of Linford was expected to behave, with poise, deference, and a flawless smile that reassured society she was perfectly content. She also knew that expectation and reality did not often walk hand in hand. At 21, Cecily had mastered the art of appearing serene even when she felt unbearably alone. So when her father announced over breakfast one cloudy March morning that she would be taking piano lessons from a newly recommended tutor, some prodigy from modest origins, she nodded dutifully, though her heart sank. Another well-meaning instructor destined to reinforce how little talent she possessed. "He is quite the sensation," the Earl said, scanning his newspaper. A Mr. Felix Arden, acquitted himself rather spectacularly in Paris, comes with glowing references. Lady Bertram, without looking up from buttering her toast, added, "You will apply yourself, Cecily. Music is an accomplishment, and an accomplished lady attracts excellent prospects." Prospects, marriage, duty, the invisible chains she had long ago learned not to rattle. "Yes, Mamma," Cecily murmured. "I shall do my best." But Cecily did not possess her mother's talent for dismissing inconvenient truths, and the truth was that music, though she loved it, had never loved her back. Felix Arden arrived at Linford House precisely at 11, as instructed. Punctuality, he had learned, softened a great many prejudices among the aristocracy. The butler's eyebrows had risen a fraction when Felix handed him a letter of introduction. His coat was plain but immaculate, his boots polished, his dark hair slightly unruly from the spring breeze. He carried no air of deference, yet no arrogance either. Merely a calm self-possession that made him appear older than his 28 years. When he was ushered into the music room, a grand, airy space with French windows, he stopped short. A young lady stood at the pianoforte, her hands clasped before her as though bracing for judgment. Soft brown hair framed a delicate face, and her grey-blue eyes held the sort of loneliness Felix recognized instantly, because he had worn it himself for years. "Lady Cecily," he said, bowing politely. "Mr. Arden." She curtsied, modest but graceful. "Welcome to Linford House." Her voice was quiet, as though unused to being the centre of anyone's attention. Felix smiled, sensing her discomfort. "Shall we begin?" Cecily nodded, settling onto the bench. Felix stood beside her, hands behind his back, observing her posture with a musician's eye, and a man's unwilling admiration. She played the first bars of a simple sonata, not poorly, but without confidence, without any belief that she had a right to the instrument. Felix listened, then gently placed a finger on her wrist. "You're holding your breath," he said softly. She blinked. "Am I?" "Quite spectacularly." A reluctant smile tugged at her lips. "I suppose I am rather nervous." "Allow me to share a secret," he said, leaning closer. "Even the greatest pianists breathe." She laughed, light, surprised, and far too lovely. Felix felt something shift in him, subtle but undeniable. Dangerous. Lady Cecily Bertram was everything society declared out of reach for a man like him. He should have stepped back. Instead, he sat beside her. "Let us try again," he said gently, not as a lady performing for judgment, but as a young woman who loves music. She looked at him, startled. "How did you know?" "Because you play as though you fear loving anything too much." Her breath caught. This time she played differently, a little freer, a little truer. Felix did not touch her hand again, but the memory of that brief contact lingered like the final note of a nocturne. Soft, haunting, impossible to ignore. By the end of the lesson, Cecily felt oddly lighter, as though someone had finally seen her, not the Earl's daughter, not the dutiful debutante, but the lonely woman hidden beneath. When Felix rose to take his leave, she said quietly, "Thank you. I learned more in 1 hour than in all the years before." He bowed. The pleasure was mine. But the way he said it felt like a confession neither of them dared articulate. Only after he left the room did Cecily realize her pulse was still racing. Her fingers tingled where his touch had rested, and for the first time in many months, she looked forward to something, perhaps too much. Because Cecily did not yet know that falling in love with her tutor would not merely be ill-advised. It would be ruinous. Chapter 2. The following weeks unfolded like a melody, soft at first, then building into something richer, deeper, impossible to suppress. Felix arrived at Linford House twice a week, always punctual, always composed, but each lesson ended with Cecily wishing he would stay longer. He taught differently from any tutor she had known. He spoke of music as something alive, something she could touch if she dared, and Felix encouraged her to dare. One windy Thursday morning, as rain lashed the windows, Cecily attempted a new piece. Her fingers stumbled. She frowned. "You're not listening," Felix murmured, leaning closer. "To what?" "To yourself." He guided her hand, not possessively, but gently, as though handling something precious. "Play the line again, but this time let emotion lead." She tried, and the notes flowed with surprising clarity. Felix smiled, his eyes bright with approval. "There. That is your voice." The praise caused Cecily's cheeks to warm. She looked away, focusing on the keys. "You make everything sound possible," she said quietly. "And you make everything worth teaching." Their gazes caught. The room felt suddenly smaller. Felix stepped back first, abruptly aware of the impropriety. "Forgive me, my lady." Cecily shook her head. "No, please don't apologize." But he did, with his eyes, with his restraint, with every inch of distance he forced between them afterward. Because Felix knew what she did not. Whispers travelled fast in noble households, and a single whisper could end him. One afternoon, after a particularly successful lesson, Cecily lingered at the window while Felix packed his music sheets. "Mr. Arden," she began cautiously, "may I ask you something? Personal?" Felix paused, instantly alert. "If it is within my ability to answer, I will." She turned toward him. "Do you regret your profession? The endless practice, the performances, the expectations?" He seemed genuinely surprised. "Music saved my life, Lady Cecily. It gave me a future when I had none." "You speak as though you came from hardship," she said softly. Felix hesitated. "My father was a blacksmith," he admitted. "A good, hard-working man. My mother, a seamstress. No tutors, no grand homes, just long days and more bills than meals." Cecily's heart ached. "Then how did you become this?" He smiled faintly. "A wealthy patron heard me playing in a tavern when I was 8. He paid for my lessons, sent me to Paris, told me I owed him nothing except to become the best version of myself." He exhaled. "I have spent every day trying to honor that gift." The silence that followed was charged, intimate, dangerously tender. "Your parents must be proud," she said. "They died years ago," he answered quietly, "but I hope they would be." "Oh." Cecily's eyes softened. "I am so sorry." Felix shook his head. "It is long past, but thank you." She took a small step closer without thinking, drawn to him by something she could neither name nor resist. "Felix." The use of his name slipped out unbidden, like a breath she could not hold back. He went very still. "My lady," he said, barely audible, "you must not." "Must not what?" "Say my name that way. Look at me that way." His jaw tightened. "Feel this way." Cecily's pulse raced. "I do not know what you mean." He gave a soft, pained laugh. "You know exactly." Wind swept through the window, scattering sheet music, breaking the moment. Felix bent to retrieve them, his hands slightly trembling. When he straightened, he bowed quickly. "Forgive me. I overstepped." "Please don't go," she whispered. "I must," he replied, voice taut, "before I say something that cannot be unsaid." And with that, he left the room, his footsteps echoing like retreating heartbeats. The next lesson came with tension so palpable Cecily could hardly breathe. Felix remained polite, professional, distant. She felt the absence of his warmth acutely, like a candle extinguished. But when her hand brushed his by accident, he drew in a sharp breath. And Cecily knew with startling clarity, that whatever existed between them had not vanished. It had only been forced into silence, which, in Regency England, was far more dangerous than desire spoken aloud. Chapter 3. By early summer, society arrived in London like a tidal surge of gossip, diamonds, and unspoken rivalry. The Earl of Linford, ever eager to advance his family's standing, arranged a musicale at their townhouse, an evening meant to impress influential guests. "Cecily will play," Lady Bertram insisted. "It shall be a testament to her progress." Cecily felt dread curl in her stomach. She had never performed before a crowd. Felix noticed her anxiety during their next lesson. "You do not have to be perfect," he murmured, adjusting her posture. "Only honest." "That is what frightens me," she admitted. He smiled. "Honesty never frightened me in you." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Cecily froze. Their eyes met, troubled, yearning. Felix stepped back, visibly struggling. "My lady, after the musicale, I intend to speak with your father." Her breath caught. "Speak with him? About us?" "No," Felix said quickly. "There is no us, Cecily." The use of her name nearly undid her. He forced himself to continue. "I must end our lessons. I cannot remain here. It is improper. It is unsafe for both of us, and I cannot, from any angle, offer you a life befitting your rank." Cecily felt the room tilt. "You would leave London?" "If necessary." Her hand trembled on the keys. "Have I wronged you somehow?" Felix's expression crumpled, revealing the truth he tried desperately to hide. "You have done nothing wrong," he whispered, "except make me wish for things I have no right to desire." Cecily's heart broke quietly, without flourish or drama, just a soft crack deep within her. "Then I shall play at the musicale," she said, voice thin. "And afterward, you may do whatever you believe is best." Felix bowed, pained. "My lady." He left the room swiftly, as though fleeing his own feelings. Cecily's tears fell silently onto the ivory keys. The night of the musicale arrived with more splendour than Cecily could bear. The drawing-room glittered with chandeliers, elegant guests murmured behind fans and wine-glasses. The Earl stood proudly at the centre of it all, greeting attendees with practised charm. Felix stood near the back, having been invited as Cecily's tutor. His presence was a torment. She saw him, he saw her, but they did not speak. When Cecily was called to perform, her hands shook so badly she nearly refused. But then she saw Felix's face, not the controlled, polite facade, but the man underneath, silently willing her to believe in herself. She sat, inhaled shakily, and began to play. At first, the notes wavered. Then she remembered his words. Honest, Cecily. Be honest. She poured every unspoken emotion into the music. Her longing, her fear, her quiet rebellion. The melody swelled, filling the room, drawing breathless attention. When the final note faded, the applause was thunderous. Cecily stood, flushed, overwhelmed. Felix's eyes shone with pride and heartbreak. She did not dare look again. The Earl's voice boomed later that night, summoning Felix to his study. You wished to speak with me, the Earl said, closing the door. Felix stiffened. Yes, my lord. I believe it is time to conclude Lady Cecily's lessons. The Earl considered him carefully. Why? Felix swallowed. She has exceeded any instruction I can provide, and I believe my continued presence may become a distraction. It was the closest he could come to truth. The Earl nodded slowly. A distraction indeed. My daughter is of marriageable age, Mr. Arden. She must not become attached to unsuitable company. Felix felt the words like blows he had fully expected and fully deserved. Of course, my lord. You will leave London after the season, the Earl added. Your reputation will remain intact, so long as you remember your place. Felix bowed deeply. I understand. But as he turned to leave, the Earl stopped him. She played beautifully tonight, the Earl said, almost grudgingly. You did well by her. Felix managed a quiet, thank you. It was the last time he spoke to the Earl of Linford. Cecily found Felix later, alone in the deserted music room, gathering his belongings. So it is to be goodbye, she whispered. Felix closed his eyes. It must be. You meant what you said, she murmured. You intend to leave. I have no choice, Cecily. She stepped closer, voice trembling. What if I asked you to stay? Felix's breath shuddered. Do not tempt me. What if I said I dash. Stop. He turned sharply, anguish etched across his face. Do not speak what cannot be unsaid. You are an earl's daughter, and I am a tutor. You are more than that. To you, he said, but not to the world. Cecily felt tears sting her eyes. Will I ever see you again? Felix hesitated, and then, unable to stop himself, he lifted her hand and pressed a trembling kiss to her knuckles. It was a proposal in everything but name. I will love you all my life, he whispered, even if I never see you again. Cecily's tears fell freely. Felix left before he could destroy both of them. Chapter 4. Felix Arden disappeared from London the next morning. Cecily woke early, rushed to the music room and found only silence. His absence felt like a weight pressing on her chest. For days she drifted through the house like a ghost, her family assuming she was merely fatigued from the musicale. But Cecily was not fatigued. She was heartbroken. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived, not from Felix, but from a London patron announcing a prestigious invitation-only concert at Lady Charing's estate, an event showcasing the finest musicians in England. Felix's name was on the programme. Cecily's heart jolted. She knew without question that she must attend. Her parents assumed she did so for the sake of propriety and social polish. No one suspected the truth, that Cecily intended to see him one last time. The evening of the concert, Lady Charing's ballroom glittered with wealth and anticipation. Guests whispered excitedly as musicians performed one after another. But Cecily saw none of it. Her heartbeat drowned out every violin, every applause. When Felix finally stepped onto the stage, the audience fell silent. He looked transformed, composed, dignified, a master of his craft. But his eyes, when they lifted briefly and found Cecily in the crowd, revealed everything. Longing, pain, love. He began to play. The piece was haunting, achingly beautiful, full of crescendos that felt like confessions and rests that felt like moments he wished he could hold forever. Cecily felt tears spill unchecked down her cheeks. He was playing for her. Only her. And suddenly Cecily understood. She could not live the rest of her life wondering what might have been. When the performance ended to thunderous applause, Felix bowed. His gaze returned to Cecily. She lifted her chin, steady with new resolve. She would not let him go again. After the concert, Felix slipped into a dimly lit side corridor, needing air, needing distance, needing... "Felix," Cecily whispered behind him. He froze. She stood there in a pale blue gown, breathless from running, eyes luminous with emotion. "My lady," he began, voice cracking, "you should not... Do not tell me what I should or should not do," she said fiercely. "I have spent my whole life doing only what is expected. But I choose this. I choose you." He stared at her, stunned, torn, aching. "Cecily," his voice broke, "your family, your future. I cannot allow..." "You are my future," she said softly, "if you will have me." Felix staggered back as though struck. "Have you?" "Cecily, I have loved you every moment I have known you. But to marry you, to even court you, would ruin you socially." "Then let them talk," she whispered. He shook his head. "Your father will never permit." "Then I shall speak to him myself." Felix stared at her with a mixture of terror and hope. "You would truly sacrifice that much?" "For you?" Her voice trembled. "Yes." Emotion swept across his face, raw, unguarded, devastating. He stepped toward her slowly, as though crossing a line he had fought for months to avoid. "Cecily," he whispered, cupping her face in his hands, "I have nothing to offer but my heart." "Then give it to me," she breathed. Felix kissed her, not with hesitation, nor apology, but with the full force of everything he had buried. It was the kiss of a man who had memorized every moment he believed he would never have. Cecily pressed closer, tears slipping between them, hands clutching his coat as though afraid he might vanish again. When they parted, Felix rested his forehead against hers. "I cannot let you face the world's judgment alone," he murmured. "If we do this, we do it together." "Then together it shall be," Cecily whispered. And that was the moment Felix Arden knew he would lay down his career, his reputation, his very future, before he would surrender her. They faced the Earl together. It was not easy. There were raised voices, disbelief, anger, and threats of disinheritance, but Cecily did not waver, and Felix, with more courage than he knew he possessed, promised he would dedicate his life to honouring her. In the end, the Earl yielded, not out of approval, but because he saw that Cecily would not be swayed. 3 months later, in a quiet country chapel far from London's gossip, Lady Cecily Bertram married the pianist who had taught her not only how to play, but how to feel. Felix composed a piece for her, performed at the altar, a soft, tender melody that told their story without words. Cecily walked toward him with tears shining in her eyes, and Felix, overwhelmed, whispered as she reached him, "You were the music I never knew I was writing." Years later, their home would often echo with piano notes, sometimes played by Felix, sometimes by Cecily, sometimes clumsily by the children who insisted on joining their father's lessons. But the melody Felix wrote for her, their melody, remained the most cherished. A testament to a love that defied station, expectation, and fear, a love that began in a quiet music room and ended in a proposal written not in words, but in music. The end. Thank you, dear reader of the Regency Gazette, for joining us in another tale of love, intrigue, and whispered ballroom secrets. If today's romance delighted you, kindly bestow a like upon this video. It helps our Gazette reach more lovers of Regency storytelling. For weekly journeys into dukes, debutantes, scandals, and slow-burning devotion, please subscribe to the Gazette and tap the little bell so you are notified the moment the next story is published. Until our next edition, may your days be filled with grace and your nights with the promise of romance.